Pilots are typically the last link in the chain. As an example, the 737 MAX events. It had design problems, it had certification problems, it had organizational problems, all those other entities that led up to being dependent on the pilot. So when we talk about pilot error, let's look at what contributed to put these people in that corner and see how we can avoid putting people in that corner. Recognize how safe we have actually gotten as an industry. The Wright Flyer in December 1903 was virtually destroyed after its fourth flight. Expectation of safety circa 1903, one major accident every 4 flights. In the mid-1930s, the Airline Pilots Association was formed. 50% of the 24 pilots that founded ALPA were killed in aviation accidents. Expectation of safety circa mid-1930s, 50% of the pilots are going to be killed in aviation accidents and their passengers.
Yeah.
I learned to fly in 1970. If we had the same accident rate that we had in 1970, it'd be some 65,000 additional fatalities that would have occurred in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
So that's how much safer it's gotten.
This episode of the Flight Club podcast is dedicated to Casey Crafton of Guardian Jets, who we recently tragically lost in the American Airlines crash in Washington, D.C. He was a well-respected aviation professional who would be deeply missed by many. Our hearts go out to his wife, Rachel, and their 3 young boys, and all others affected by this tragic event. If you'd like to support Casey's family, there's a GoFundMe link in our show notes. Aviators, welcome to the Flight Club podcast. I'm your host, Jason Middleton. I'm a pilot, I'm an aviation entrepreneur, and I'm a huge fan of the people that make up our diverse aviation community. Today's guest on Flight Club couldn't come at a more important time. He's a pilot with over 50 years of flying experience and 14,000 flight hours. He was awarded the FAA Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award. He's one of the nation's leading authorities on aviation safety. He's been working in aviation safety for over 30 years. He has investigated numerous aviation accidents with the NTSB and other governments. He's been an aviation safety contributor to nearly all major media outlets. You can find him on television shows such as Air Disasters and Why Planes Crash. He currently is an instructor at the USC Aviation Safety Certification Program. He also runs his own safety consulting firm called Safety Operating Systems. Aviators, welcome Captain John Cox.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation.
Howdy, sir. Well, thank you for being here, John. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, for full disclosure. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're out here for your day job, which is teaching people safety, which I absolutely appreciate. It's such an important thing in aviation. And, it's ironic when we scheduled this episode, the week we've had in aviation. What a rough week.
Yeah, it's been tough all week, and it's tragic by every definition, and it impacts everybody in aviation. I mean, we're too small a community for it not to.
Yeah, it's such a big event now when an airplane goes down like that, like the American Airlines flight that went down to Washington, and even to maybe a smaller, lesser extent, the Lear that went down in Philadelphia. But it never happens. It's such a rarity now that accidents happen. It's big news.
That's one of the changes I've seen over the years is the media frenzy that goes on after a major accident. I mean, we saw it with the South Korean 737-800 and then the American Airlines Mid-Air in Washington and then the Lear 55. I mean, it just really fed the media because, in fact, it is so rare.
Anytime something like that happens, it's even if it happens more frequently, it never lessens the impact, especially as aviators, right? We're pilots. And, there was a small airplane that went down in Santa Barbara last week, literally the day after the American flight. And the pilots, I actually knew one of the pilots on the airplane. He worked for our company, good guy, working for another flight department now. He and his wife were on the airplane, very, very experienced pilot, and they survived.
Good.
They were actually in one of the SR-22s with a parachute.
Oh, okay.
And they pulled the parachute, I guess. Of course, there's a lot of investigation. There's a lot of things that are come out on it, but apparently they pulled the parachute just enough to stop to lessen the impact, and they were able to survive the crash. So. We're going to learn a lot more, I want to talk to you more about that. But tell me about your current work and kind of what areas you're focusing on right now.
We're doing a lot of different things. We're doing a lot with emergency response planning, helping corporate and airlines be the best response possible in the event that they're involved in an incident or an accident. So it's we're doing a lot there. And then just aviation safety in general. We're doing a lot of audits. We just did some work with a military organization in Europe, doing audits for them for safety management systems and things. So it's one of the real true pleasures of this job is the diversity. No 2 weeks are the same.
Safety is such an interesting subject in aviation or anything really, because like so many things contribute to it. It's not just a pilot and an airplane. There's tons and tons of other things. When you do your audits, what kind of things are you going and looking at when you go to do an audit? Tell me more about that. We
typically, if we're doing a certification audit for one of the accreditation organizations, then we're looking at a specific set of standards. Increasingly, though, we're doing industry best practice audits where we'll go in and based on the experience of the auditors, we'll help operators start picking up what is accepted as industry best practice, change management, things like tool control programs. Some of the smaller operators don't have that and hadn't really focused on how important it is. Those sorts of things we do a lot. And then once we're on site, the operators tend to ask us to do more. We've done airport audits and things like that, just because we were already there. And can you do airports? Sure, we can do that.
Yeah. So there's a huge range in aviation. Let's say you're just looking at operators, right? When you have really big operators, American Airlines, and then you have a small mom and pop 135 operator with a couple of airplanes. How can those smaller operators operate the same level of, or can they? Is it even possible to operate the same level of safety as some of these big airlines?
Oh, they absolutely can. And what safety programs have to be scalable. Yeah. So we've got clients that are one airplane operators all the way up to, I think the largest one corporate operator we did had 54 or 5 airplanes or aircraft.
Yeah.
So
was that 135? Were they running 135?
It was 91, sort of. It was outside the U.S. So it was a little. It was more 91 than 135. Right. 135 is in a real transition time right now.
Yeah.
And
tell me more about that.
The requirement for safety management systems is huge.
Yep.
It's a major step forward. I commend the FAA for moving forward in this area. But there's about 2,700 135 operators in the country. Yep. And about 10% really have effective and functional safety management systems. So the rest are going to have to figure out how to customize SMS for their operation.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a challenge for some. Other ones, it will go more smoothly. But in every case, it's going to make them a better operator.
Yeah. And, we've been, at my 135 operation, we've been dealing with this for a while. We're pretty much ready to go from what we think is coming, right? They haven't released all of the parameters yet, but we believe we're pretty ahead of the game. But we've brought in a consulting firm like the work you do, and there's no way we could have tackled it. And we're not a small company. We have a lot of resources. There's no way we could have done it without the help of somebody outside the company.
Having people who really understand the nuances of SMS and what the FAA is looking for it's a smart investment that you made, bringing people in from the outside.
Yeah. When you talk, so some of our audience may not know what an SMS is. So safety management system is what an SMS is. Tell me more about what a safety management system is and what is it used for?
SMS is really, it's a formalized process of risk management. It's the same thing we do every day, except it is formalized and there's documentation. And that documentation, the record keeping, allows us to start looking at trends to see how effective safety mitigations are. The real backbone of SMS is the reports, the flight risk assessments, the hazard reports, the safety reports. That lets the safety officers look, and then working with good analytics, they can say, okay, how well are we doing to mitigate an accepted hazard to an acceptable level of risk?
Yeah.
How well do we manage change? How much can we forecast what our fleet expectations are going to be, or new destinations, or any of those things? And how do we manage the probable risk that we're going to face?
Yeah.
It sounds very complex. I equate it to, it's a set of stepping stones. You do one at a time.
Yep.
And before long, you realize that you've taken quite a journey, but it's been one step at a time.
Yeah. One of the things that's really big at my company is the culture behind safety, right? And it's something that, you can put a system in place, you can put procedures in place, you can put reporting systems in place, you can have all these management people, but if you don't have buy-in and culture, it doesn't really work.
Culture's everything. And it has to start from the top.
Yeah.
We go typically to the CEOs or the owners, and they have a very frank sit down with them to say, if you do not support this, it will fail.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get that support, if you get them being a cheerleader for SMS, the culture will begin to change, and then it becomes ingrained in the organization so that when the new hires come in, it's just the way we do business.
Yeah. I think the word is just, it's like just culture.
Right. Exactly.
Just culture.
Yeah. Dr. James Reason was the real founder of that.
Okay.
And it gives you the ability.
What was his work in originally? Was he aviation guy?
No, he was actually, I think, University of Manchester.
Oh.
He's a researcher.
Got it.
Really, really bright guy. Yeah. But he came forward and said, look, people make mistakes.
Yeah.
And if they are in a culture where you can step forward and say, hey, I made an inadvertent error, and it not have them have repercussions for that, but to say, okay, let's understand why and how you made that mistake, because it could happen to others.
Yeah.
And that way you can step forward and say, look, this procedure screwed up, and here's why. I'm dealing with it every day, and it's forcing us into workarounds. Right. If you can bring that kind of thing forward as an organization, you can then fix things and they get better. Yeah. So if you go back in aviation history, you go back to the 40s, 50s, and early 60s, a lot of the accidents were mechanical. Yeah. The airplanes weren't real reliable. The technology was not great. And so you could pretty well oftentimes look and say it's a mechanical problem. Yeah. After that, it really started focusing on the pilot. So we got CRM, we got all of the better pilot training, better simulators. So we dealt with that. SMS deals with the organization, the organizational culture, and it's the next logical step in aviation's safety journey.
Yeah. This is all at the operator level, or most of it is at the operator level. The safety management system, the mandate, the FAA is mandating, companies like mine are under an SMS program, and that's great. In fact, I was going to tell you, I have one of the things I do as a leadership. So I'm the CEO of a Part 135 operator, and whenever we have an NDOC class, new hire pilot NDOC, I go in there with no other pilots, no other management people, just me and the pilots, and I make an agreement with them. This isn't written into our manual anywhere. This is just the agreement that I have all over aviators. If you ever feel like something is unsafe and you don't do it, you're going to get a huge thank you from me, number one. And number two, if anyone ever pressures you or you feel pressured to do something, here's my cell number, call me, I will deal with it. And I have that agreement with our pilots. And it maybe once a year, something comes up, Yeah.
That's a wonderful place to start. But I'd encourage you, don't just limit it to the pilots.
That's true. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Back to the kind of just culture, and, we want people to come forward, tell us what's going on out there in our company. And do you feel that I'm going to bring in the FAA. I'm going to be a little hard on the FAA right now. Do you feel like they have that same buy-in? Like that? Do you believe the FAA has that same just culture? Maybe even it's just a perception or not. Tell me what you think about that.
I've had different experiences with FAA. They're a complex organization. At the highest levels, absolutely yes. There are still some air safety inspectors that are out there that are firmly planted in the mid-1950s, where it was punitive first and often, but they're decreasing in number.
I would agree with that.
So one of the things that FAA faces a big challenge is to train their air safety inspectors in how to oversee an SMS program, which is not nearly as easy as it sounds.
Right.
Because SMS is from the FAA oversight. It's not only with the airlines, but it's also the large airport, the Part 139 airports.
Yeah.
It's also at the manufacturers. It is now going to the Part 135s. So increasingly, aviation within the U.S. is being primarily driven by SMS. So the inspectors that are reluctant or are unsure, they're getting better training, and there is getting to be more uniformity in how they're acting. So we're seeing it. We're seeing the agency move, and I talk to a lot of the policymakers within FAA pretty frequently, and they're really promoting it within the agency. So I'm optimistic that FAA, and they have their own internal SMS, as does air traffic. Yeah. So I think that the transition for the 135s will be another help in getting the FAA to be uniform in their approach to it.
Like, I mean, I'll give you some practical examples. I just wanted to pick your brain on this a little bit. So every pilot that's commercial or non-commercial has to go get an aviation medical. I just went and got mine. I'm over 40 clearly, so I have to go every 6 months to get my medical. And they ask you a whole bunch of questions. You better say no to all those questions, is the feeling you get as a pilot. And I don't know how you feel about this subject, but I don't know any pilot that's going to go yeah, I have hypertension. Yes, I get headaches all the time. Yes, I get this. All those things, they're going to say no to all of them. So because they're afraid they're going to lose their license, or they're going to have to go to the next step to get some other medical. Now they're grounded, and the aviation medical, they don't mess around. Like if you have a medical issue, like we've had a few of our pilots that has taken them months and months and months to get their medicals back. So it scares people. And to me, like when I ask the question, does the FAA have a just culture? That's precisely those kinds of things.
The aeromedical office has been under scrutiny for a long time. They are pretty bureaucratic. And if you are a pilot trying to deal with them, I would encourage you to consider it the same way that you would if you were dealing with any legal issue. Go get help and go get good help.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
And so there are organizations that deal effectively with the aeromedical folks, but it is very bureaucratic.
Yeah.
That's a tough part. The FAA just culture operationally is pretty far removed from the aeromedical people. They don't really interact all that much.
Yeah.
So I think that the focus on SMS is more on the operational side than on the aeromedical side.
Got it. Yeah. And I think it's an interesting thing when you talk about, I'm a big health advocate. And the things that were, you can have a pilot that they will pass a medical, but they're not the healthiest people. They eat really poorly. They don't sleep very well. They may be overweight. Do you think that like some of these things will be like aviation safety as it relates to the health of a pilot? To me, that's part of the whole thing, right? Fitness of flight, mentally fit, physically fit. Do you think that we're going to see any changes with that once we start implementing SMS with the kind of health of the pilots?
I think it could show up if the data began to show up that we're having pilots that are on the road and then calling in, unfit to fly while they're on the road, and that the investigation is that this person was 250 pounds overweight and ate exclusively fast foods and slept 3 hours a night.
Yeah.
Okay. All of those things that could be part of the understanding of what happened. The SMS process would be helpful to the investigators wherever it ends up. Once you determine the hazards or the problems or the risks, then the mitigations you put in, and that's when it could in your example, say, okay, we need to get you on a health program because you're having more health issues.
Yeah.
And the other one is they don't pass their physical every 6 months.
Especially the way people are aging now, people are healthy into their 70s and 80s. Very, very healthy. I really wish, and I'm just going to pick on the FAA some more. The age restriction at the airline, I think, is silly. We should have, I believe, we should have really strict, physical, maybe a little bit more, do some, health things. I don't know, have just a more in-depth physical, but let the pilots fly longer. And we lose so much, the wealth of knowledge.
We do.
Think about that.
One of the things that, I did 25 years with the airlines, and then a lot of my friends did, another 15 after that. And as you get senior, you tend to fly more long haul. Mm-hmm. So you're up in the middle of the night, which is harder for somebody in their 60s or 70s to deal with as a jet lag.
Yeah.
And the irregular sleep patterns. So, there probably is some medical foundation for being conservative here.
Yeah.
But I would say let the data lead you where it leads you.
I agree. And I think that we're going to have, I'm always optimistic that we're going to make good, positive changes. And I think the more people like you being, going on shows like this and doing all the work you do really helps that move the needle a little bit. Some of the work you've done, like one of the things that we learn a lot from aviation accidents, and not to get into aviation accidents a bunch, but you guys learn all kinds of stuff from aviation accidents. But there's a lot of things that don't result in an accident, which is what we're talking about, SMS, right? Reporting things, bringing it to the surface, analyzing it. One of the things that kind of frustrates me a little bit is that we, as an operator, we kind of live in a little bit of a vacuum. You know what I mean? Like we only know what's going on in our company. We don't have access to the other operators in our peer group. We don't know what's going on inside, right? I'll bring up some little things like ramp incursions. We had 2 ramp incursions last year at my company, meaning like wingtip to wingtip. And what is going on, right? Our director of safety is losing his mind, calling all of his buddies in the safety community, and all these operators are like, oh yeah, that happened to us 2 times this year, 2 or 3 times. It's happening in Teterboro, it's happening in Van Nuys, and what's going on? And he answered a DOM, went down and he's looking at the ramp one day and he's like, there's way too many airplanes on this ramp. Like this is the problem. But that kind of stuff, he had to get on the phone and start calling his friends,
The FAA has opened up InfoShare to the 135 operators. Mm-hmm. And that is the airlines have found that to be a very productive way to share safety information. Yeah. So I would encourage any of the 135 is to go listen and build a network of people that are doing similar things that your organization's doing.
Okay. The big things that we're running into now are it's a very, very busy world right now in aviation, not only at the airlines, but 135, GA, Part 91 operations, all of that. And we're seeing really impacted ramps, which is operationally, it's not a catastrophic safety problem, but it is a safety problem, right? We don't want to damage equipment. The other thing we're seeing a lot is fatigue, a lot of pilot fatigue. And like you said, getting into the long haul flights, flying over many, many, many time zones, fatigue is becoming an issue. But really the core is the lack of pilots. We just don't have enough pilots. It's really hard.
We don't have enough pilots. We don't have enough maintenance technicians.
No.
So we as an industry have a recruiting challenge for many of the safety critical jobs.
Yeah.
So in the past, one of the real barriers to entry was the cost of getting initially licensed. Mm-hmm. And then once you're qualified, the pay rates would put you under the definition of poverty. So
below poverty, I believe.
Yes. And so there, people that wanted into the industry looked at it and went, this is crazy to spend that kind of money and take on that kind of debt
Yeah.
when I'm going to be making $18,000 or $20,000 a year. That has improved somewhat, and the pipelines are full right now.
Yeah.
Particularly in pilots, but we still have this exact same issue with the maintenance
I
technicians.
agree. I 100% agree. I mean, we don't have an MRO at our company. We outsource all of our maintenance and one of the, not specifically for this reason, but that's one of the reasons we just don't want to staff up for it.
But you're still responsible for them.
We have a team of maintenance managers is how we operate. But it is hard to recruit these people. You're absolutely right. And I don't want to say the level of competency, but it's really more of an experience thing, right? I mean, the more you do something, the more experience you build. So we're just not getting those people that have been in the business for that long in the industry. So they just don't have that many, many, many years of experience.
COVID drove some of it, both with the airlines and the manufacturers, but generally kind of throughout aviation. During COVID, the 135 world was actually business picked up. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, there was a lot of opportunities where highly experienced people were offered retirement packages so that they could downsize.
Yeah.
All right. The problem was it came back faster than we could recruit.
Yeah.
Consequently, we've seen both supply chain shortages because of lack of experience of technicians to do it. It's things such as
windshields. You can't get a windshield right now.
Engine overhaul.
300
days for an engine overhaul.
Yeah, tires. We couldn't get tires for a while.
Couldn't get tires. So there was a lot of this. So the industry, we failed in an opportunity there to stabilize the workforce during what we knew was going to be a temporary condition of COVID. We just didn't know how long.
Yeah.
And I don't think we really adequately anticipated how fast the demand was going to come back.
It was wild. I mean, on the corporate side of things, I mean, it came back hard and fast. I mean, we were turned off for about 2 months, I think, maybe 2 months, maybe not even that. And it came on so hard, we were not ready at all. Luckily, we actually hired a bunch of people because we knew it's going to come back on, and we needed people at all areas of the company. But when two things happened in our world, a lot of companies laid off pilots and personnel and operations people and mechanics. They just laid everyone off. We'll call you if it picks back up. And then, so the demand went massive, but though all these airplanes were grounded, they're rapidly trying to staff them back up, which creates other problems, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it was.
And this is where a good
time.
safety management system will help you balance those challenges.
Yeah.
Because instead of being reactive with a good SMS, you're much more proactive with it, is identifying what are the likely issues we're going to find.
Yeah.
And then mitigating them before they actually turn into an incident.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to circle back to I know I'm really glad we're talking about SMS so much. This is great. I want to, like, the FAA just culture implementation of SMS. Do you feel like the industry, aviation professionals, are going to buy into the relationship that the FAA is going to have? If I disclose things that the FAA is going to see, do you see some sticking areas there?
I think actually there's precedent for it.
Yeah.
If you look at the voluntary self-disclosure that have been very effective with the 135s and 121 worlds.
Yeah.
In addition, if you look at the Aviation Safety Action Program, ASAP, that has been very, very successful.
Yeah.
So I think with those as precedent, I think in a regulated, controlled program like an SMS program, I think that the FAA is going to say, okay, you came forward, you voluntarily disclosed. And I mean, I've seen some pretty good screw ups that have been voluntarily disclosed, and the FAA is like, okay, and their follow-up question is exactly what it should be. All right, I understand what happened. What did you do to fix it?
Oh, cool.
That is a really more important question.
100%. Yep.
So I think the precedent's there, and I think that there is the mechanism where if you do find a case where the FAA or a particular air safety inspector is not going along with it, you have redress. You have the right to take that opinion up to the manager, the CMU manager, or to region. So there are ways to protect the organization from a rogue inspector. Fortunately, we don't have very many of those.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's getting better as long as we can get them staffed up, because they're having massive staffing problems as well. At the FSDO level, I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's really challenging.
A lot of retired folks out of the airlines have gone to be air safety inspectors. I know a bunch of them.
That would be just that's great. It's really good.
That's decades of experience, real world operating equipment in all weather, all around the world.
Yeah.
And that's, there's a lot of them there, and it's a good thing, I think, for the agency.
Oh, that's great. What do you like? I wanted to ask you this question about why do you think that is it an industry thing? Is it why don't airline pilots go teach primary training? The retired airline pilot. So you have the best people training the newest people. Right now we've got the newest people training the newest people. Right? Like it's never been that way though.
No,
maybe it wasn't
not in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of ab initio programs that utilize, retired pilots or very experienced pilots that are teaching, primary flight and instruments and, advanced flight. It's a wonderful thing, but typically the flight schools, they're not the high paying jobs, and they're high demand. You're flying 6+ hours a day.
Yeah.
And speaking as somebody that is no longer 25 years old, do I want to do that 5 days a week? There's a work-life balance in here.
Yeah.
And so what we are seeing is a lot of retired guys are working as simulator instructors for airlines, and that's wonderful. They know procedures, they know profiles, they know the operation of big airplanes. So that has been a very, very effective means. And they're not making super dollars, but it's a reasonable pay scale. Yeah. And the working conditions are geared toward those individuals.
Yeah. I was just at CAE in Vegas at their new Gulfstream facility there. And my instructor was, my ground instructor. He might've been the sim instructor for me too, but he was seniority number one at American, retired. And now he's teaching sim.
Yeah.
He's teaching Gulfstreams. He had never flown a Gulfstream before, by the way, but he's teaching them, and what a great wealth of knowledge. Like he was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was really cool to have somebody at that level.
It's really good for these folks to be still in the industry. I mean, I understand their retirement and, kick back and relax and enjoy life, but I'm awfully glad to see them still making a contribution to the industry.
Yeah. I'm going to jump around a little bit here. I have a bunch of stuff I want to cover. And when it comes to culture in an organization and pressures that pilots feel from the outside, do you ever think about the internal pressures that you kind of impose on yourself? One of the things that I try and talk to our crews about it. We talk a lot about in our safety training at our organization, but everyone has a different level of like internal pressure they put on themselves. Boss wants to go from here to there. I feel pressure to get that flight done. Then you add in things like weather, terrain, maybe you have an MEL item, one FMS, one radio isn't working, whatever it is, right? And the boss might not be pressuring the pilot, but the imposed or the self-imposed pressure. How do you feel about that?
Aviators are notoriously mission-oriented.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all reasonably high-strung. We are.
Come on.
We are all goal-oriented. We're all, for the most part, overachievers. Mm-hmm. And so you give us a task, and our philosophy is get out of the way and let me get it done. And we can get very, very creative. And I can give you a wonderful example if you'd like.
I love it. Yeah.
Friend of mine flies a Gulfstream, and they ended up having to divert into Orlando, the executive airport, and had an MEL on their APU. Mm-hmm. You can't start a Gulfstream without an APU unless you have
a Huffer cart.
Yep. There wasn't one on the airport.
Oh.
At all, anywhere.
Okay.
So they went and got in a rental truck, and went to the Orlando McCoy, the Orlando International, rented a huffer cart, came back, paid somebody, run the huffer cart. Then they got in the Gulfstream, started it, and about 10 minutes before the boss arrived, they have one engine idling, and they paid somebody to take the huffer cart back. Yeah, catastrophically expensive, but they did get the
those
job
guys
done.
I want can I have their names? That's
very innovative. Yeah. But the boss, because it was one of the new Gulfstreams, the boss wanted to take it to Europe, and they're going, no, we've got this MEL on the APU, and the boss was like, it hadn't affected us so far. Not having any clue what they had done to make this thing work. Yeah, so,
they often don't.
Yeah, and so, but this was all self-imposed pressure to make the job, get it done. So, we're much worse on ourselves typically than most modern thinking companies are. In the days past, it was, go get in the airplane and fly because I told you to. Yeah. Now it's, I don't want to do that. And you don't get I'll find somebody that does. Yeah. You don't hear that much anymore.
No. Well, there's Texas still. So
there's a few places still out there. But
I'm just kidding, Texas.
We put far more pressure on ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And and there's varying levels of it. Like, I recently had an experience. I'm the CEO of the company that I run, right? I'm the top person there. And I also happen to be a Gulfstream pilot, and I was doing a flight. I'm a co-pilot. I'm just an SIC now because I don't have time to stay that current, but flying with a really good captain. And he had a really long day the day before, max duty day, almost max flight day. And we had a pretty easy schedule the next day. And we flew just up the coast from Oakland back up to Van Nuys, ended up having to divert for weather. We actually had to do an actual go around. We got down, it was one of those days at Van Nuys that was the ceiling, the runway visibility was good, but the ceiling was just dense. It was like 200 feet and just dense. And we got down to minimums, which is I think 300 AGL on that approach. And you had no ground contact. It was just pure white. I'm like, go around. And we went around. I'm like, we're actually doing a go around from minimums right now, which you never do. So anyways, So we did this thing. We ended up at Burbank and we land and our phones are getting lit up from dispatch, from flight support. And they're like, hey, we need you to go pick up and no call ahead, just an email. We need you to go out to Salt Lake, pick up an AOG recovery, an airplane that had broke out there, take the passengers down to Cabo, come back up, clear customs in LAX, and hop back over to Van Nuys for a flight tomorrow. So it was like, and I was fresh because I just did the one leg with him, this captain the night before. And I looked over at him and he was just like slumped down in his seat. He's like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I'm like, well, let's just call fatigue. No big deal.
Yeah, right.
And so, and I knew the day I had 100%, no problem. I didn't really want to do the flight either, but, and so I called it in to flight support and I'm like, yeah, I don't think we can do this trip. Why? Well, they're like, you guys are perfect duty times. We have a like a fatigue management chart thing. Like you're right in the perfect spot for fatigue management. And I'm like, yeah, but Brian, I'm having to now explain myself.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, so are you calling out fatigue? I'm like, yes, I'm calling out fatigue. And it was like, I felt pressure. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this is so weird right now. What if one of my co-pilots that, down the chain that's just starting their career, how are they going to feel?
Correct.
Like it was really interesting experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we do this to ourselves. And there's an old adage that one of the old captains told me at one point, and it served me well, is because it's legal doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea.
Yeah. That's true.
And I've had that discussion with dispatchers and crew schedulers and on occasion.
And and we talk a lot with our flight. We call all that stuff flight support in my organization, but we talk to them a lot about support, just support. Listen, and never put pressure. But it's like that particular instance, I was putting the pressure on myself, right? I felt it on myself, right? They weren't putting pressure on me.
Any professional pilot, every professional pilot that I know has had that same sort of situation come up.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some things that I feel like are a little bit hidden. And I'm going to pick on the AMEs again, but mental health in aviation, right? We had that accident over in Europe where the pilot committed suicide and took a whole airline down with him. And he obviously had some mental health issues. Like, what are your thoughts on that in aviation?
It's tough. I mean, we train people to deal with high stress. We put them in simulators and then the world caves in. Engines fail, they catch on fire, hydraulic systems, the weather's always bad. We deliberately put these people under very high stress. And then we evaluate how they handle that stress. I wonder if there is a way to be objective in personality types and grade that effectiveness of handling stress. Yeah. But it's not only the high intensity, short duration stress, it's also the long duration stress, where you've got a sick kid that's constantly in and out of a cancer treatment thing. So that stress is with you every minute of every day.
Yeah.
And it's cumulative. So now put you in a high stress situation, you're not as able to cope with it. I think a lot of that is having a mechanism that you can call somebody and go, look, I'm getting stressed out here. So how about not putting me on a 17-hour flight to Singapore?
Yeah.
I can run domestic, but I really need to kind of stay close.
Yeah.
Until the stress level goes back down.
Yeah.
Aging parents is another one that is very tough on people.
Yeah.
So, or a spouse that's going through a medical issue or a divorce or a home foreclosure, any of these things that deal with someone's personal life, how are they handling that stress?
Yeah.
If there's a peer support network available to them that is non-jeopardy, then it can really help. But it's a very thorny problem, and
if you think about the numbers, right? There's 320,000 commercial pilots in the world globally, something like that. And then if you look at the at least here in the U.S., they estimate as much as 25% of the population has some form of a mental health challenge, right? Some are depressions. There's a whole range of things that it could be. 25%. If you applied that to the commercial pilot pool, that's 75, 80,000 pilots that potentially could fit in this range that we,
Yeah, I've seen the numbers. I do think that pilots, because it takes a certain personality to want to strap on an aluminum tube, hurl themselves down a long piece of concrete at unimaginable speeds and defy gravity for a living.
Right.
All right.
We like to have fun, is what you're saying.
So, but it is a particular personality draw, and I think that there's probably a lesser percentage of people that have mental challenges that are drawn to that profession. So I do think it's a smaller percentage, but let me be really clear. There's definitely work we as an industry can and should do to improve the mental health capabilities that are around professional aviators.
I think we're gonna. I think it's such an open forum subject now, and these things always trickle in, right? And I think that we are doing some good work. I try and talk about it at my company, right? When I do all hands meetings and talk about the stress. We're coming into the holidays, guys. Everyone's gonna be really busy. There's, you have a bunch of family stuff. You're going to be away from your families. All these things that kind of, culminate in, challenging days, weather and all these things. So we try and talk about it as much as we can, and then be available to people too.
Right. Yeah.
Just be available and listen. Some people just want to talk.
They do. And then finding people who the company can recommend is, hey, this is a good person for you to go talk to. Mm-hmm. And have those, they're mental health professionals in a sense, but they're really more of a counselor type, and they're a good ear to listen to, and it's all confidential.
Yeah.
And so having that can go a long way as an asset for anyone in the company, not just the pilots, maintenance technicians, dispatch, any of the safety critical jobs.
Yeah. I was flying with a pilot last year, one of our really, really experienced G550 pilots. And he was having a rough we did a 2 or 3 day trip together, and he was making some mistakes, and I can tell he just wasn't his normal, just like precision aviator, and I didn't really ask him about it. And then we got done with the trip, and he went to school and failed. Like, he couldn't pass his check ride. This is a guy that's been a pilot forever. I'm like, what? So finally our chief pilot talked to him, and he's like, yeah, my mom, we had to put her in a home. She got out. I've been dealing with this on the phone, and I live here and she's out there. And he had all this stuff going on with exactly what you just talked about, aging parents, but nobody knew, I wish he would have hey, this is going on with me, guys.
Yeah.
And just come forward.
But here again, we're talking about this personality type, this, overachieving type A.
Yeah.
That's going to be, put me in, coach. I can handle it. Don't worry about it.
Totally.
Even though sometimes that they're at being maxed out or worse.
What are some of the things? What do you think we're missing? If you're, you see a lot of things. You have exposure to a lot of things that I probably don't have exposure to. What do you, in your mind, what would you want to see us kind of talking about more?
I think we have aging technology and infrastructure and air traffic control here in the U.S. I think that there are lessons we can learn from some other ones, but we've got to sort the funding out for, the next gen process took decades.
Yeah.
It needs to take years, not decades. But there needs to be a stable funding source, and that rests with Congress.
Yeah.
So
you don't think Elon will come in and fix all that stuff?
I'm appropriately skeptical.
Okay. Sorry, Congress.
But that would be one of the things, and stabilize the FAA. It should be a good career path for people that come into aviation safety.
Yeah.
We must have good regulators.
Yeah.
They're a critical part of the aviation safety network.
Right.
So, those sorts of things, the manufacturers, they're big on technology, but in recent years, all of them have struggled in one way or another to meet the exacting high standards. Okay, what can we use in technology? What can we use there?
Yeah.
Pilot training, we need pilots to be trained with the appropriate balance of manual handling skills and the ability to run technology. And that's a challenge. One of the great weaknesses in our system is we take a young person and we send them to a school, and they've got all this wonderful technology, all of these Garmin equipment and all of this fancy autopilots, and they learn their instrument procedures, and they go out and get their first job in a Beech 99 that the last time it had an upgrade was about 1955. And they said, you're sent into the Northeast in the middle of winter. Good luck. Don't bend the airplane. And so we need,
you're right.
We need to take lessons from a lot of the good training academies of what's working and what hoops are we jumping through just to satisfy the FAA? And let's look at it and make sure that the folks coming into our industry are as well prepared as possible and not prepared for what we used to do back in the day.
Yeah.
So I think there are challenges there. We need to make, and all the companies need to recognize there is an increase in the demand for work-life balance.
Oh, yeah.
So if I come to work for your company and you go, okay, we're going to put you in a hotel in Singapore for 20 days a month and we'll call you.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to stay there real long.
Right. 20 years ago, you would have.
Yeah. 20 years ago, it was normal. And I remember those days. But so there needs to be a work-life balance that requires additional staffing.
Yeah.
But you get more career-oriented people. You get people that are going to stay with you. Yeah. So there's a balance there, and I think there's work there. Technology-wise, it's amazing what the airplanes can do.
It is.
But are we, and one of the big concerns is turn the automation off are the pilots prepared on a very short period of time
Yeah.
and do they have the manual handling skills to go fly a hand-flown approach to 200.5 and do it with confidence?
Right. Why would we need pilots in the future?
I think AI, as good as it is, it can only learn what has happened in the past. Okay, so put AI up into a Sullenberger scenario.
Yeah.
Right. There's no training for that. You're going to have to get creative.
Yeah. Well, couldn't you teach the airplane to do that?
Oh, sure.
I mean, you could teach an airplane to do anything.
Absolutely.
Right.
But where's it going to go? You can't make the airports.
Well, couldn't you okay, there's a river, go land in the river.
Okay, that's and that may be a great idea, and in some other cases it may not.
Yeah.
So there's a judgment piece that humans are better at creative solutions than any technology so far.
Yeah.
So the interface between technology and the humans, that's where the real challenges are, is to get the best out of both.
Yeah.
The technology is great for repetitive tasks.
Yeah. So, I mean, in your work that you've done, it's either directly pilot error or pilot error as a contributor to, right? And most things, there's obviously accidents that happen that aren't pilot error as a contributor, but it's generally involved. Would you agree with that?
Pilots are typically the last link in the chain. They're the last opportunity to fix it and salvage it.
Yeah.
There may have been, and you can look as an example with the 737 MAX events.
Yeah.
It had design problems. It had certification problems. The Lion Air airplane had maintenance problems. It had organizational problems. And oh yeah, by the way, the pilots did not handle that in an optimum way. They were the last link in the chain.
Yeah.
But everything, all those other entities and organizations led up to being dependent on the pilot. So when we talk about pilot error, let's look at what contributed to put these people in that corner.
Yeah.
And see how we can avoid putting people in that corner.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the reasons, I mean, recognize how safe we have actually gotten as an industry.
It's amazing.
It's staggering.
It is extraordinary.
The Wright Flyer in December 1903 was virtually destroyed after its fourth flight. Expectation of safety circa 1903, one major accident every 4 flights. Okay.
How many, if you applied that today, how many accidents would that be today?
It would be raining aluminum. But this really gets quite a bit better in that if you look at it in the mid-1930s, the Airline Pilots Association was formed.
Yeah.
50% of the 24 pilots that founded ALPA were killed in aviation accidents.
Yeah.
Expectation of safety circa mid-1930s, 50% of the pilots are going to be killed in aviation accidents and their passengers.
Yeah.
All right. I learned to fly in 1970.
Yeah.
If we had the same accident rate that we had in 1970, and truthfully, we thought we were doing pretty well. If we had just maintained that static through today, there'd be some 65,000 additional fatalities that would have occurred in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
So that's how much safer it's gotten.
Yeah.
And I saw last night when they were talking about the safety of aviation, although we've had a bad couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's 1 in 13 million boardings. In 2023, the commercial airlines flew 35 million flights without a single fatality or even a single accident.
Yeah. Safest
form of transportation ever designed by humankind.
I mean, it's probably the safest thing you could do during your day.
It is. I mean, I get asked this a lot, well, what's the most dangerous part about flying? And my answer is driving to the airport.
100%.
And there's no question of it. Statistically, I'm not trying to be flippant. It's actually true.
It is very true. And it's getting better every year.
Exactly.
And I think to your point earlier, when a accident does happen, like the one that just happened in DC, it becomes a huge media thing and it will continue. Want to know why? One of the first things we talked about was when an aviation accident happens like that, and we learn from it. How long? What's a typical timeline that it takes to get it out to where everyone's adopting it? Right? Maybe it's a procedural change for the specific airplane that like how long does it take to get to the people flying the airplane?
For example, at Colgan 3407, which was the Buffalo accident.
The icing stall, right?
No, there's no icing in that.
Oh, there was no, okay.
No. That was just a pilot-induced stall. They just didn't, they let the airplane get slow, and the recovery from the stall was not, to say it was not good.
Wasn't he like holding back on the yoke or something?
Yeah, he stalled it 6 times.
Oh, Jesus.
So, or if you look at Air France 447, those 2 watershed accidents changed the way that pilots are trained. They changed the way that they're evaluated. They changed the process by which we understand what pilots should do in the case of aerodynamic stall. It took 3 to 5 years before that became accepted worldwide.
Really? Okay.
But there were early adopters of that within a year.
Yeah.
So it is not as though you turn a light switch on and off. It's more a growth of a better procedure.
It hits the training centers
and
then goes out from the training centers.
So, I mean, that's probably the easiest, most recent example of how we've changed things based on 2 watershed accidents.
Yeah, that Air France was I read the whole report on that thing, and it was, I mean, they were just standing there wondering what's going on with the airplane.
Worse, they had the side stick buried full aft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they didn't, I think it was a pilot flying in the left seat that had his stick, right? Seat, it was the right seat. And apparently they couldn't see it over here. And he was just frozen. Like, it is wild.
Yeah, it was 447 was a very difficult accident because it went to the culture of pilot training and, a lot of things like that. And then it also, one of the things that they investigated somewhat is human reaction to startle. And people react differently to very adverse startle events. Some people freeze, some people react aggressively. There's several different approaches.
I always put my hand up like I'm holding a kid in the car seat.
One of the saddest
my co-pilots hate it when I do that.
I've ever seen was there was a gentleman that was in the ground collision accident in 1991 here in Los Angeles, where the U.S. Air 737 struck a Metroliner that was on the runway, and the 737 careened into a building and caught fire. And there was a gentleman, I worked that accident, so I walked into the wreckage, and there was a gentleman still seated in his seat with his seatbelt fastened. He wasn't injured. He sat there in fear and died.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Frozen.
Unbelievable.
Frozen. Yeah. So people handle adverse conditions very differently. And I've thought about him. He has stayed with me for all these many years of how sad he could have gotten out.
Yeah.
But no.
That's amazing. Huh. Yeah. Well, when you have a airplane full of people and you're in a situation like that, there's a lot to deal with, and it's a lot of responsibility too.
Amazingly, you see the airline crews and how they perform in situations like this.
Yeah.
And the performance of the crews very typically is just wonderful. Yeah. It's amazing what they do and how well the training works, and it's proven time and time and time again.
Yeah.
So that's one of the pillars of safety that we have really excelled with is crew training in the unlikely event of a full-blown emergency.
Yeah. So speaking of training, one of the things that it always perplexes me about the training just standardization in general, the standardization of the training programs and standardization in general in aviation. Every single time you have every operator, and people probably don't know this, but every single operator has a unique training program that's certified. It's approved per op spec by the FAA, and there might be subtle differences in it. Maybe their CRM is a little different. Their call out to each operator. Why hasn't the FAA mandated that when an aircraft is certified, it should come with a training program? Like, this is how you fly our airplane, period. And every single pilot, every single operator around the world, regardless of where they're at or what, that's how they fly the airplane. Like, why do you think that we we've not gone to a standardization system like that?
I think the capability and operational challenges that different operators face is so diverse that the manufacturer can and do come out with recommended checklist, recommended training procedures, recommended training manuals, and you can adopt those, and those are fine. But I'll give you an example. My airline at one point bought an airplane that was made in Europe. And it was designed for people that this was their first jet and things like that. So the checklist were very, very detailed. It was a read and do checklist. So when we got there, I was coming out of a 737. Two of my colleagues were coming out of 727s, and another one was coming out of 737. We had been flying big airplanes in high density environments for years.
Yeah.
So we looked at this checklist and said, there's no reason to do this. We can introduce flow patterns. We can introduce and make it more standard to our Boeing fleet so that knowing the pilots are going to transition through.
From the Boeing,
From the Boeing to the Fokker and then back to the Boeing. So from our perspective, we wanted to make that transition as easy as possible and as uniform and as standard. So we dramatically changed with the manufacturer's concurrence and no technical objection and FAA approval. We massively rewrote everything.
Yeah.
And then later, several other airlines emulated and copied us.
So yours was better.
So we liked it better.
I mean, if it probably was better, right? Whenever you can always revise and make things better. I always felt like it would be such an efficiency and contribute to safety a lot, right? Especially in our world. I live in the 135 world. Pilots fly, the contract pilots, the Part 91, it's crazy how much goes on in our side of the business. And there's very little standardization anywhere. And if Gulfstream said, okay, here's how you fly the Gulfstream profile always on this airplane, here's your call outs. And by the way, if Captain John's flight department found a better way, let's talk about that, get it through and get it approved. And now that's how you train. If that happened and every single Gulfstream pilot I flew with were doing the exact same thing, it would be amazing. It would be a huge change.
The airlines have mastered it. I mean, literally with the airline, I don't know this person that's seated next to me that I'm going to spend the next 3 or 4 days with.
Right.
But I know exactly what he or she is going to do.
Yeah.
And in mid trip, you land and that person gets out and somebody else comes. It's seamless.
Yeah.
And because the standardization is so strong. And it's one of the ways the airlines have been so successful and so safe. So I think there's opportunity in the corporate and 135 world. I used to brief my first officers, look, I try to fly it as close to the book as I can. If you see something that is diverging from it, it means I've screwed it up. Please let me know that. And if you take that approach and you go to the Gulfstream manuals and you say, okay, we're going to fly it as close as we can to this, then you're contributing to that standardization.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. And things like GOM operations, right? MELs. We can't use an MMEL. We have to get our own MEL approved. And I just feel like there's so many opportunity. There's so many things that go on in our world that we could standardize. It would create a lot of efficiencies and a deeper level of understanding.
It is, but let me touch on the MEL and MMEL thing for just a second, because the Europeans figured out that there are so many configurational differences in airplanes that an MEL that works really well on one airplane is really not appropriate on another. So wisely, they said, okay, you have to have a serial number specific MEL. You can't just randomly adopt the MMEL.
Yeah.
So that actually tailored the minimum equipment list to your specific airplane.
Yep.
Good on you.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I think that because of the differences in the STCs and all of the things that corporate airplanes have that make them unique and make them wonderful, but it also makes the challenge of trying to have the generic airplane and put a minimum equipment list for it and then apply it blindly. No, I think serial number specific is actually an improvement.
Nice. Do you, in your work in the helping operators implement SMS. What are the Part 91? Are the FAA, where are they at on imposing SMS on Part 91 operators right now?
They have not made any formal position. Okay. However, NTSB, more than one NTSB board members has made the informal recommendation of every turbine operator should have an SMS.
Got it. Okay.
And personally, I agree with them.
Yeah.
I see the benefits day in, day out of a good SMS.
Yeah.
And I hear the complaints of, it costs more money and this, that, and the other. Jet airplanes are expensive.
Yes,
by every definition. Yep. They're expensive. If you can improve safety and reduce the likelihood of an incident or accident, that's not an expenditure, that's an investment.
Yeah.
And so I'm not persuaded by the cost issue to say that a turbine operator can't afford an SMS when we have safety management systems that are designed for smaller operators that are scalable.
Yeah.
I think it can and should be done. And actually, I think it is the next stepping stone in the aviation safety journey.
Yeah.
So I'm an advocate for it.
Like, what do you say when, there's a lot of flight departments. There's a lot of ways to have a flight department, right? You can be with a management company like us, operate 135. You can have a big, robust flight department like Nike or some big corporation like that. You could have one pilot that's managing a King Air, right? And I've seen this a lot where owners, they fully trust their pilot, and it's really blind trust. Maybe they've been flying for them for a few years, but they really don't know exactly what that pilot's doing up there, right? Or are they really safe? Are they really running checklists? Are they really doing the things that are keeping them safe? The owner doesn't often know they don't even know what those things are. Like, what would you say to people that own airplanes that run these flight departments?
Well, a couple of things. A professional pilot that's running a small flight department that has the total trust of an owner. That owner is putting the same trust in you that he or she does with their attorney, with their surgeon, with their doctor, or other professionals.
Yeah.
We have an obligation to meet that professionalism. We have an obligation to run it well and not just, well, do you know what this cost? When I hear that, I can get, no, nor do I care.
It's not my job.
That's if you're that concerned about cost, let me give you a jet card because you're probably going to be happier there.
Yeah.
If you want the beauty and benefit of having your own airplane, it comes with an investment.
Well, and they want to get there safe.
Of course.
I always joked with, before I started my company, I used to fly for a Part 91 operator. Just I was his pilot. I was that guy. I was his pilot, and that was it. And when he first hired me, he's like, Jason, I have a family. I got to get home safe. And I'm like, Mike, I don't care if you get home safe. I'm like, I have kids. I'm getting home safe. And you're going to consequently get home safe. So he's like, I never thought about it like that.
In my early years, I was about 23 years old, and I got hired by a very small company with a Beech King Air, one pilot.
Nice.
So,
is that what 100 or 200? What was that? Which King Air?
An A90.
Oh, an A90.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This goes back a long ways.
Yeah.
Dinosaurs roamed the earth in those days. But they had coal fields and things scattered around the southeast, and we would go there. And when the weather was bad, because I was still fairly low time, I was pretty conservative. And it's like the boss would stand on my head and threaten to fire me, and fired me regularly.
Yeah.
But in every case when he fired me, the wife would call me that night and go, "You're not worried, are you?" And I learned, "No, ma'am." She said, "Keep doing what you're doing. You're going to bring him home safe. Okay. Don't worry about the rest of it." And so I had a guardian angel.
You had your little protector back there.
Yes.
Nice. Get the wife on board.
Yeah. She knew that I was not going to take the airplane into weather it shouldn't go in, or in mechanical conditions that it was marginal.
Yeah.
No matter what he said. And I've handed him the key. I handed him the keys several times. I said, "You fly it home." And,
I love that.
he would get very upset with me and he'd go, shut up and go back and fly us home. And, yes, sir. But so, there comes this part that you have to have an understanding that when you sit down in the airplane, it's my airplane as the pilot in command. And I want to get you where you want to go. I want to do it as economically as is reasonable. But if there are decisions that, oh no, we have to get in there. No, please go get another cup of coffee. We're going over here.
I love that.
It's not open for debate.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is because I worked for guys like that too back in the day, and it's not like that anymore.
No.
Like owners are fantastic. They're like, whatever the pilot says. So one of the, I have this weird role running these companies. I work with owners, right? I'm doing business development, trying to bring airplanes in under management and then pilots. And I'm like, and I counsel owners. I'm like, that guy's in charge as soon as you get on the airplane. And whatever he says goes. I have his back 100%. And his job is to get you there safe. And he's always going to do it. Or you're not going to get there. You may not go. It's his call too. And owners like, great. It's really changed.
Yeah. I'm glad to see that. Because in the early 70s and mid 70s, it wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
I lost a friend of mine because they got forced into weather that they ended up doing things they shouldn't have and ended up control flight into terrain and lost the jet. And,
there's been a lot of those stories.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of GA. So I live in Santa Barbara, and there's a big doctor, doctors live in Santa Barbara, but they work over in the valley, Bakersfield and Fresno. And they have practices over there. So all of airplanes, and they zip back and forth across the mountains. Well, the mountains are generally, if you're about 6,500 feet, you're good, but there's a couple of peaks that pop up here and there. And there's one particular mountain out there. I think we've had 4 airplanes go into it in the last 20 years, all doctors. And they just, for whatever. But I was going to say, we had a serious accident in Santa Barbara. It wasn't a doctor. It was actually 2 professional pilots, one of which had been flying the airplane for many, many years. It wasn't a stall. They were doing a pattern, a lap in the pattern. And we think a mechanical malfunction on the airplane is what we think. We're not sure yet. But they ended up pulling the parachute. I think you have to be at 600 feet on the Cirrus. I don't know exactly what it is, but I believe it's about 600 feet for that thing to guarantee it's going to be fully deployed by the time you hit the ground. And they deployed it very, very low, but it was just enough to where it stopped that. They had enough, they reduced their inertia enough to not kill them.
Good.
They banged the airplane up really bad and it caught on fire and they got knocked out. And luckily police were right there and yanked them out of the airplane. And they're recovering at Cottage Hospital now, thank God. But that parachute, I was always like when I saw that Cirrus, like, what's a parachute ever going to do? But now I'm like, I'm a believer in some of these new techs.
The numbers of the ballistic recovery system saves has been significant. And part of it is that's a pretty high performance single engine airplane.
Yeah.
And if you take people with lower experience levels and put them in a high performance airplane, in the past that there have been some unintended consequences and tragic results in some cases. This is an additional layer of protection where if that does happen, slow it down and pull a parachute and then things get better.
Yeah.
And so it's, it's a good addition into the safety tools and assets that we have.
Yeah. What do you think of the new return to land buttons on some of these new airplanes?
I think it's very interesting technology. The thing that I'm not sure it's fully matured yet.
Sure.
I think it will be. But there have been cases where you don't realize there's something like there's an air show going on there, or there's some unintended consequences that have happened a couple of times. But I think that it's a great peace of mind. And what AOPA had for years, they called the pitch hitters course, where they would take non-pilots, specifically spouses of pilots, and teach them to be able to land the airplane. Great idea.
Yeah.
This is kind of the next level of that.
Yeah.
Is to say, okay, if something happens, and a lot of the people who own airplanes, they're not 23, 25-year-olds.
Yeah.
They're people later in life that have been very successful in business.
Yeah.
And so they have a higher degree of potential incapacitation. So this is a magic button that fixes that.
Right.
So I think it's a good addition to the safety net.
Yeah.
I would hate for anybody ever to be dependent on it
Right.
and say, well, okay, I'm all messed up. Click. All right. Now that the airplane lands itself, I want to go back to why you got so messed up you were dependent on it.
Sure, yeah.
So there's, that.
The higher performance these airplanes get, the people purchasing them and flying them, you could get yourself into a situation, right? And I think this technology, it's already in I think the Vision Jet, the TBM, and maybe the Meridians.
I think so.
Yeah, but it's coming for CJs and any Garmin equipped aircraft, right?
The entire very light jet industry, and I've had opportunity to talk to a number of these owner groups and have been really impressed with how people approach it. But you're still putting people with relatively low experience, total flight time, into adverse conditions with a jet. And jets do two things. They're high performance, which means they're hard to slow down. And secondly, they're fuel critical. And some of these jets, I flew Lear 24s for a short period of time. That was an airplane.
That's a fun airplane.
It was great. But you were out of fuel. You were out of gas when you shut the door to leave. And so there has to be flight planning that says, I'm going to make all decisions about what we're going to do with the jet at 40,000 feet.
Yeah.
And that's how we flew the Lear. And that same philosophy has to be with some of these very light jets, that you want to make all the decisions up high. It's wonderful up there, but when you get down, they go through fuel at a very, very significant rate. So these are the kinds of things that we're putting people in. Can we have technology help them? I think, yes. I think that we're going to see more and more evolution of that.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the first things they ask you is about, single pilot or no pilot operations. And this is, here's my belief on it. I think there's going to be a day in the future when there's no pilots on an airplane. I just think that's going to happen, right? A lot of people disagree with me, but we're already seeing these things. I had a friend, there's a lot of aerospace tech that happens in Santa Barbara. I have a friend that's an engineer and he's a military contractor and he works on all the drone automation systems. He's like, I can fly an airplane anywhere in the world from any airport to any airport, and it'll do it perfectly better than any human ever.
Yep.
And it'll happen. We do it right now.
Oh yeah. Look at the U.S. Navy. They've got them coming on and off carriers.
Right.
And they're now increasingly they're going to be refueling the fighters.
Elon has rockets landing on towers.
Yeah.
Over here at Vandenberg.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's evolving. I don't think the public is ready right now.
I agree with you on that.
To get onto an airplane. Now,
100%.
Does that mean that we may not see freight being hauled in the middle of the night with single engine caravans or something like that? I think that's possible. I think the training is going to be more in very remote areas to validate the technology and let it operate for a while.
Yeah.
But do I see no pilot passenger jets in the near future? Probably not in my lifetime.
Not for a while. I think it's coming. I think within your lifetime. We'll put a bet on it. I'm going to call you John. Yeah. It happened.
Well, we'll see.
Airbus is already testing. Airbus is
doing so, but as the FAA told them, not in U.S. airspace.
Right.
And so because as it stands now, you're going to have to go from a clean sheet of paper design.
Yeah.
You can't modify one of these airplanes that's out there. They were all designed for two pilots.
Yeah.
The checklists are geared for two pilots. The procedures are geared for two pilots. The systems are geared for two pilots.
Right, yeah.
So if you design from the outset,
there's two seats.
Yeah. If you design from the outset as a single pilot, okay. Now, what do we do from a certification standpoint?
Start over.
Start over.
Right. And it's got to be a ground up.
Yep. And how long do you think that's going to take? It's a real challenge for the regulators.
For the regulators, for sure.
Absolutely. So are we capable of it? Yes. Today, we could design an airplane that with either no pilots, I own a Tesla.
Yeah.
And, the technology is amazing.
It's awesome. The auto drive is awesome.
It is.
I don't have a Tesla, but my really good friends, they're just awesome.
But you can't trust it.
That's true.
I love it. And it reduces driver fatigue. It does all kinds of wonderful things. But is it 100%? No. And there have been accidents that prove that. There have been tests that prove, it doesn't differentiate between a traffic cone and a pedestrian.
Right.
So
which one am I going to hit?
Yeah. And it doesn't make those decisions either. The ethical thing of you can go head on into a truck or go into the back of a school bus.
Yeah.
Or, there's an ethical piece there. What do you do?
What do you think about data linking? So let's say you do have an airplane that is single pilot and it's got a data link to some center somewhere, right? Where there's a kid on a flight simulator that's monitoring the flight, and they're the emotional side. So you mentioned something about the immediate reaction and you handle stress and different. But if you have somebody that's not sitting on an airplane, that's not all of a sudden there's a pressurization loss or something catastrophic, right? And the pilot is their adrenaline levels go up here, but there's a kid sitting in a box in the desert that's oh, no problem. Here's a procedure. And they don't have the emotional connection to what's actually going on. It's just a little screen.
Yeah. I think there may be merit to that if you can ensure the data link.
Right.
All right. As an example, if you look at the Embraer 195 that got shot down recently, the problem was that all of their GPS was jammed. And worse, it was being spoofed.
Yeah.
So all of this data link can be compromised.
Yeah.
And so how do we ensure that?
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of questions.
Yeah.
Could a cyber hacker come in and take the airplane?
That's scary.
So, these
are things that can happen. You're right.
Right. So, is the technology there?
Not yet.
Not yet. And here again, I go back to my question from earlier, because we can do something, does it mean it's a good idea?
Right. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. I agree with you. What else you want to talk to us about? Is there anything else? I want to hear where they can find you. And I want to encourage operators to go look at your website and engage in, because the SMS is super important and it's going to be mandated.
It is.
And we need help. We can't, I'm a pilot. We cannot do it ourselves.
Correct.
We need help. Yeah. And it's complex.
Right.
So go to John and have him help you.
Yeah.
Get your SMS
we want to customize it. You have to customize an SMS. You cannot do a cookie cutter SMS. It just doesn't work. And so we first got to get to know the operator and understand them. I, in fact, was just with a new operator last week, and my whole first trip out there was nothing more than just getting to know the operation.
Yeah.
Then we can start implementing the changes to get an SMS that will work for them.
Yeah.
And that's, I will say SMS will make you a better operator. It will make you a more efficient operator as well as a safer operator.
Yeah.
So it has, multiple benefits.
Yeah.
So
and there's an economic benefit.
Oh yeah.
And I will say, running a safety program like we do is very expensive. It's very expensive, but we have an economic interest in running a very safe operation, because the alternative is not good financially for us.
And two, we've briefed and have regular discussions with every major insurance company, aviation insurance company out there. And when we start talking with them about multiple accreditations for SMS programs or safety programs in general, they get extremely interested, because their risk management people, this gives them an objective way to rate operators from a risk standpoint.
Yeah.
And that turns directly into premiums, and it turns directly into willingness to insure.
Do you think we'll see lower rates for SMS?
I think what you'll see is more insurance companies vying for the business.
Got it.
The insurance business, because of the cost of aviation accidents, they struggle. So the premiums are not likely to go down, but the rate of premium increase can be driven by a good, effective SMS.
Yeah. We just had our first down year. They lowered our premiums this year for the first time in probably 7 years.
Congratulations. That's a wonderful thing.
It was good. We were very happy to see that.
Yeah.
Now that you brought up insurance, and the insurance companies are getting more and more involved in our operations. They're coming on site. The underwriters are coming on site.
Good.
They want to meet with us every 6 months. They want to look at our safety systems. It's really changed in the last few years.
One of the things that, in fact, our industry has evolved, and I've had this discussion with the insurance folks, they may end up as the de facto pointy end of the spear, if you will, for the advent of more progressive safety systems.
Yeah.
Because the regulators can only set the minimum standard.
Yeah.
All right. If you're going to exceed the minimum standard, it may be economically driven by the insurance company saying, we're managing our risk and we don't want to insure anybody that doesn't meet this risk profile, this or better. And so they may be the advocates and the catalyst for safety changes.
Do you ever see a world where they would privatize the regulators?
I don't think you'll see that. I think you will see air traffic control privatized.
Yeah. What year was that that Reagan basically cleaned out?
83.
83, yeah. Yeah.
I was flying in those days.
Reagan was a badass. I love that guy.
It was awfully quiet out there for a few days.
Yeah.
And we were still running, scheduled airline, and we were going in and out of places. It was pretty quiet.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Quiet.
Awesome, John. Well, we'll have all the links to your website and more information on you in our show notes. But thank you again very much for being here. Really appreciate your time. I know you got some place to be, so we'll let you get out of here.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. It's been fun.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Flight Club Podcast. Please subscribe to the show, leave a comment below, and follow us on Instagram at Flight Club Pod. We'll see you next time.